CEO's amazing mockery of Janitor exposed incredible talent discovered when Orchestra panicked. Ben stared at the gleaming marble floor of the corporate lobby, the weight of his old janitorial uniform draping over him like a shroud. It was just another evening, another round of polishing, but today felt different. He had just witnessed Claire, the high-powered CEO, turn the boardroom into a gladiatorial arena, flinging insults at him, her laughter echoing against the glass walls. "You should be grateful for the night shift, Ben. It's just as productive as your violin practice." What stung wasn't just her words but the knowing chuckles from the executives who had likely never touched anything but the finest instruments life had given them. Every swipe of his mop felt heavier now, each swirl of the cloth a reminder of dreams long shoved to the back of his mind. He had sacrificed music, passion lying dormant as he pushed through life, providing for his family at the cost of his own joy. What could he have achieved with that precious violin? Would he have been a maestro? Or just another ghost, like he felt now, fading into the walls of a place that saw him as little more than an invisible role? As he drew another breath, he wondered, was it worth it to hide his talent forever? If only he could tell them. If he could strum those haunting notes that lived deep within him, perhaps they would see past his faded uniform. But the fear came rushing back, the fear of being laughed at, of being exposed as a farce. His resolve wavered like a note stretched thin. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. The quiet of the building was interrupted one evening when word spread quickly that a prestigious orchestra was performing in the lobby. Curiosity tinged with anxiety bubbled in him. Then, amid the strains of practice, disaster struck. A lead violinist fell ill, and the musicians scrambled, panic erupting beneath their polished exteriors. Ben felt an undeniable pull, as if a current of fate was electrifying the air around him, daring him to step into the chaos that he hesitated. He could feel the weight of his family's history in the decision stacked against him like piles of unfinished sheets of music. The thought of their faces, proud yet pained by his silence, gnawed at him. But then, the haunting melodies began to crowd inside him, bursting to break free, calling him like sirens from the dark rivers of his past. Taking a deep breath, shoving the doubts into a corner of his mind, he stepped forward, shaking but filled with resolve. The moment he gripped the violin, the panic evaporated, leaving a stillness in the room that echoed his racing heart. He was back in his element with the stark realization that he was about to redefine everything. As the first note soared, he knew it wouldn't just take talent to win over those ice-cold executives. Torn between the joy of playing and the anxiety of judgment, Ben felt as if he was playing for more than himself. Each draw of the bow was a declaration, a confrontation against everything Claire stood for, her mocking voice swirling like a dark cloud above him. Would they see him? Would he become something more than their janitor? The cadence of the audience shifted, attention swelling, unresolved and poised for an explosion. Ben could feel it, he could feel every eye on him, waiting, anticipating, questioning. Every note he played wrapped around his fear and determination. This moment was only the beginning. And as he poured every fragment of himself into the performance, he stood on the precipice of a reality. Forever changed, tightly clinging to the aching fear, what if this was his only chance? As Ben's bow danced across the strings, the notes punctured the thick tension within the corporate lobby, erasing the unyielding atmosphere created by Claire and her executive entourage. Each note seemed to pierce through the veil of skepticism, stirring a spirit in him long buried beneath layers of self-doubt. With each crescendo, he reclaimed a part of himself lost in the monotony of life. His heart thrummed along to the rhythm of the violin, igniting a fire he thought extinguished. The glaring lights above felt less like accusations and more like a spotlight illuminating his hidden talent. He lost himself in the music, forgetting for a moment who watched him. The bow became an extension of his desire, an agent of his unvoiced dreams. Suddenly, it was clear, he was not merely a janitor but a musician whose past was riddled with missed opportunities that he was desperately trying to reclaim, yet, moments of clarity were fleeting, slipping through his fingers like grains of sand. The laughter still echoed in his mind as he navigated the precarious balance of pride and vulnerability. Would they allow him to transcend his position? The joy of expression was intoxicating, but the gaping risks loomed just outside the bubble of the performance. If he failed, the repercussions would be apocalyptic. He could slip back into anonymity with even heavier chains shackled to his soul. With an emphatic sweep, he pulled a haunting melody from the depths of his experience. The executives shifted in their chairs, their faces betraying traces of confusion, surprise, and perhaps a hint of admiration, elements he had never seen on their polished facades. The sobriety of realization dawned on him. These were people accustomed to excellence, and they were watching a janitor sweep away the dust of their assumptions. Somewhere deep down, a part of him resented Claire. Her dismissive attitude had pushed him to this precipice, turning every smirk into a motivation. The weight of her derision fueled the flames of his performance. He played not just for the audience but for himself, rejecting the placement she had shoved him into. What did it matter if they never valued his worth? Wasn't he this moment a testament to his resilience? But as the last note lingered in the air, a cacophony of applause erupted around him. It was a raw, honest reaction from the assembly, genuine and unfiltered, filling the silence he had so often encountered. Relief washed over him in waves. The binding fear was not gone but had transformed into a flickering light of potential. Ben took a deep breath, the cheers washing over him like warm rain after a long drought. He realized this performance mattered far beyond mere music. He had stepped out of the shadows, confronting not just the audience but himself. The shockwaves of his performance resonated with possibilities, hinting at paths that could diverge from what he had always known, yet, just as the euphoria began to settle, he spotted Claire's expression freeze into an incensed scrutiny. Her laughter had vanished, replaced by a deep-seated hostility that crackled through the air. It became clear, this was not just an applause, it was a challenge. How would she react to her plans gone awry? In that pivotal moment, the realization struck him: this wasn't merely an opportunity for recognition. It had escalated into a confrontation. The time had come to face the embodiment of everything holding him back. Would he step further and demand the respect he had earned? Or would he retreat into the safety of anonymity? As the echoes of applause transformed into an unsettling silence, Ben stood at a dangerous crossroads, aware that every decision from here on would define not just his career, but his very identity. Ben's heartbeat reverberated in his ears, each thump echoing the silent tension wrapping around him like a heavy fog. The raucous applause had faded, but its remnants still danced in the air, filling him with an undeniable adrenaline. Yet there, at the precipice of this momentous occasion, stood Claire, her gaze sharp as a knife. In her eyes was a discovery he'd hoped for yet dreaded, an acknowledgement that she had never intended to grant him. He felt a swell of defiance rise within him, pushing against the confines of his janitorial identity. This was not the end. This was just the beginning of a reckoning. Who do you think you are? Claire's voice sliced through the lingering applause, cool and mocking, a thick cloud of disdain. Your little stunt might amuse the office, but it doesn't change your place here. That phrase, your place, reverberated in his mind, reminding him of the boundaries he had accepted for far too long. It was true, the fluorescent lights that had once felt like judgment now seemed distorted through the dense fog of her condescension. He stood his ground, the heat of indignation igniting a clarity he hadn't realized was buried beneath his shame. I'm Ben, he replied, his voice steady, and that performance was me. For once, I'm not hiding. Claire scoffed, the sound rife with disbelief. And what do you think that proves? One moment of frivolity doesn't change your reality. You're still cleaning up after us. But the moment weighed heavier than her venomous words. It held the potential for transformation, daring him to reject the chains of his past. He wanted to articulate every unspoken fear, each moment of self-doubt served to justify his insignificance. But instead of responding in kind, he chose a different path. It proves that I am more than a role. I can be a force and artist. I want to let your perception dictate my limits. The words spilled out, carrying not just defiance but a burgeoning sense of self-built confidence. He could see her irritation deepen, darkening her features as if the very concept of his revolt was an affront she couldn't comprehend. For the first time, he smiled the kind of smile that radiated freedom, not just rebellion. But would this newfound flame carry him further? Would this confrontation prove worthwhile, or would it merely ignite a wrath he couldn't withstand? In that moment, Ben resolved himself to fight for his recognition. He had stepped outside the shadows, refusing to shrink back into anonymity, only to reveal that vulnerability was not a weakness. It was strength, tenfold. As he turned his gaze from Claire to the crowd, he saw heads nodding, murmurs of admiration thickening in the atmosphere like warm honey. They were absorbing every word, sharing the silent realization of the unexpected truth, that the janitor was reinventing himself in the most audacious way. A new plan began to take shape in his mind. He would no longer be defined by the sweeping of floors or the scrubbing of windows. Music could open doors, but he needed grit and strategy to keep those doors ajar. Networking. Connections. A way to showcase his abilities not just as a fleeting performance but as a professional. Tomorrow, I'll take steps to secure an audition for the city orchestra, he resolved inwardly, planning aftershocks that could surge beyond the walls of the corporate office. However, Claire, sensing that his resolve was solidifying into a mission, tightened her grip on the debasing power she wielded. "Let us see how far your delusions take you," she shot back, her eyes challenging and filled with the threads of confrontation. The gauntlet had been thrown, the stakes had heightened. Ben felt the weight shift in the atmosphere, sensing the collective anticipation. Would he be able to transform this moment into a future of his design, or would he face further opposition from Claire and her coterie? Uncertainty loomed, but the compass of his heart pointed toward action. He stepped back, not retreating, but readying his launch. The moment had arrived to carve out his destiny, one note at a time. Would he shatter the barriers imposed on him, or would he succumb to doubt once more? The following morning felt charged with potential, the air crackling like a freshly struck match. Ben awoke before dawn, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Today was not just another day, it was a pivotal point in a newfound trajectory. The memories of the previous evening replayed like an anthem in his mind, reverberating with courage and resolve. He could sense something monumental was about to unfold. His first task was practical: write down the steps needed to target the city orchestra's audition. As he fumbled with the pen, his thoughts grew tangled. Confidence, a fleeting muse, wrestled with familiar whispers of self-doubt. Who was he to believe he could secure a spot in such a prestigious setting? Would this be another futile attempt, destined to be buried under layers of disappointment? No, he whispered to himself, shaking off the sticky residue of fear. This was his chance. He picked up the pen again, the ink flowing as he jotted down not just tasks but affirmations. Network, practice, be persistent. Ben reached out to a former university professor, Mrs. Caldwell, whom he hadn't seen in years. Their connection might have waned, but not the impact she had during his formative years. An email blurted out in a flurry, filled with tentative enthusiasm. He detailed his ambitions, the urgency pulling his words taut, and pressed send, releasing the energy of hope into the universe. With a decisive action, he grabbed his old violin from the corner of his humble abode, brushing off the dust that clung to it like remnants of his past. He recalled the lessons, the struggle to produce a note that resonated beyond mediocrity. Would those hours spent in solitude yield anything now? Finding an old piece of music, he gingerly tucked it beneath his chin, feeling the familiar weight of anticipation blend with the cold reality of self-judgment. The first note pierced the air like a hesitant whisper, terrible and flat. He winced but persevered, slowly regaining the rhythm that had once felt second nature. As each note spiraled into the room, emotions washed over him: frustration, joy, even sorrow echoing through the instrument as if weaving a tapestry of his longing and growth. The hours slipped by, and when he finally finished, perspiration glistened on his forehead. He craved validation, and not just from himself. Ben reached out once more, this time to another serendipitous contact, a childhood friend, Mark, now a prominent music producer. Armed with a mixture of courage and trepidation, he extended an invitation for coffee. It was a daring step, extending exposure beyond yesterday's timid fade. At the cafe, Ben sat fidgeting, nerves crawling under his skin like restless ants. Mark entered, exuding an effortless charm, a juxtaposition to Ben's discomfort. They exchanged pleasantries, but as the conversation turned toward music, Ben felt a burning shock of inspiration and fear contend within him. "Just a janitor now, huh?" Mark teased, a wink in his eye. Ben swallowed, grappling with how to respond, how to convey that the janitor had embers of a musician hidden under layers of neglect. "I'm actually gearing up for an audition with the orchestra," Ben admitted, his voice steady despite the roar of apprehension within. Mark's eyebrows raised in surprise, stimulating genuine interest. "Really? That's bold. What about your practice? You know it's highly competitive." The weight of Mark's expectations bore down on him, but Ben was resolute. "I've been practicing. I've got dreams that reach beyond the mop and bucket." As the words crystallized in the air, he sensed a change inside, a camaraderie forged not through past familiarity but through shared passion. The conversation blossomed, giving him validation he hadn't known he craved. Yet just as hope began to burgeon, he glimpsed Claire walking by the cafe's window, her expression tight with ire, a reminder that his journey was riddled with potential dissenters. Suddenly, self-doubt wove back into the fabric of his resolve. Would the connection with Mark be fruitful, or would it simply expose him to more ridicule? The future remained a contested battleground, and as the prospect of the audition loomed ahead, uncertainty tightened its grip around him once more. Ben could feel her shadow lurking, ready to pounce if he faltered. But determination surged. He could not succumb. Victory lay on the other side of fear. Would the warmth from Mark's encouragement be enough to shield him, or would Claire's looming presence become the insurmountable barrier he feared? The next chapter was approaching, and as Ben mused on the path ahead, he realized one fact: the time had come to face Claire and her hushed contempt. As twilight cast its glow over the city, Ben paced the room like a caged animal, his thoughts an erratic storm of emotions. The cafe's fleeting warmth with Mark now felt like a distant echo. As he glanced at the clock, anxiety constricted around his chest. Time slipped away like opportunity, and before long, he'd have to confront the very person who personified his self-doubt. Claire had been a figure of both inspiration and intimidation throughout his life. Her acerbic remarks about his current job haunted him. They cut through the heart of his aspirations, making him question their validity. Would confronting her be a moment of liberation or desperation? He pondered the dichotomy, trapped between a desire for validation and a fear of invalidation. The soft strains of a distant violin floated through the evening air, beckoning him back to his instrument. He couldn't afford to dwell on uncertainties now, not when the chance to claim his identity was within reach. The audition loomed, demanding focus and tenacity. He needed to hone every ounce of his passion, steal back control, and rise above the derision. Ben clenched the violin until his knuckles turned white, as if squeezing sanity from the wood. He positioned the bow, inflating his chest with a newfound determination. The first notes escaped, clumsy, but they spiraled into something increasingly beautiful, melodies of struggle interwoven with resilience. Each stroke of the bow battered back at the creeping doubt that Claire represented. He remembered Mark's supportive presence, an anchor in the turbulent sea of challenge, yet with each crescendo, thoughts of Claire crept back in. The lingering experience of her disapproval morphed into a palpable antagonist within him. She stood as a stark reminder of his past missteps and failures. How could someone who had soared so high in her field dismiss his ambitions so easily? Disappointment twisted into anger as he pushed through the piece, channeling every ounce of his frustration into the performance. The last note hung in the air, quivering hesitantly as if seeking permission to linger. In that silence, clarity washed over him. Ben understood now that his journey was not just about facing Claire, but confronting the remnants of his own insecurities. The moment became a crucible of sorts. The act of playing morphed into an internal rebirth, forging a stronger intention to claim a piece of the world he had long believed was devoid of him. He allowed the silence to expand, letting it inhabit the corners of the room before releasing a deep breath laden with both relief and anticipation. His decision crystallized: he would not only confront Claire, but he would do so with the conviction of a man reborn through music. The next day's rehearsal felt like the excess before the final performance. He arranged to meet Claire at the old coffee shop where they had shared laughter, dreams, and ultimately, unease. The prospect of confronting her palpable disdain felt like facing a mirror reflecting not just her doubts but his dire fears. As the sun dipped below the horizon, lining the path in hues of gold and crimson, Ben made his way to the café. His heart beat a furious rhythm in his chest. This could either be a pivotal turning point, a moment of clarity amidst shadows of hesitation, or it could unravel into a confrontation that would paralyze him with doubt. But just as he prepared to step inside, a sudden realization halted him: simply facing Claire wouldn't be enough. He needed to articulate his worth, argue with the courage he had cultivated through every wretched moment of insecurity. He took a deep breath, ready to wield his newfound resolve like a weapon. With that thought, the door swung open, and the waiting thoughts of confrontation coiled tightly in his mind. How would Claire respond? Would she appreciate the man he had become, or would she strike once again with the venom of contempt? The question lingered as he stepped across the threshold, the weight of fate heavy in the air. This was the moment everything was about to shift. Would he break free or remain ensnared in the web of others' perceptions? Ben stepped into the café, each footfall like a thunderclap in his mind. The familiar smell of roasted coffee mingled with the chill of uncertainty that gripped him. There she was, Claire, perched at the corner table beneath the flickering light, her laptop open and a scowl erasing any trace of warmth in her demeanor. The urge to flee struck him, but he steeled himself against it, allowing the weight of his decision to anchor him. As he approached, his pulse quickened. The flicker of recognition in her eyes was immediate, but it was quickly enveloped by a measure of disdain. This was not the reunion of friends, it was the encounter of judge and defendant. For a fleeting moment, he felt that familiar rush of anxiety swell within him, but he fought against it, determined to stand his ground. "Claire," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "I wanted to talk." "About?" she replied, her brows arching in skepticism. She always had a knack for dismissal, and he could feel the weight of impending criticism. But this time, it would be different. He had rehearsed what he wanted to say, the arguments and counter-arguments cycling through his mind like a litany of armor. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said about my job, my choices." He paused, desperately trying to maintain eye contact. "And I realized I've let your opinions shape my own self-doubt for too long." Her silence was deafening, and with it came a flood of memories, the moments when her words had struck him down. Beneath her sharpness lay a fear he had to confront. She pushed people away, but why? "Ben," she began slowly, her tone dripping with the condescension he had braced for. "You know the music industry isn't a hobby. It's a ruthless business. You have to be strong, relentless, and sure of yourself. Starts with those who can't take criticism. And how do you know what I can take?" He shot back before he could rein it in. An ember of anger sparked, and suddenly, the words flowed with the force of a flood. "You've never celebrated my victories. All I've heard are your judgments." Her jaw clenched, but Ben pressed on, riding a wave of newfound conviction. "I'm not asking for your approval anymore. I'm here to prove to you, to myself, that I belong in this world. I've practiced every day, faced my fears, and pushed past my limits. I'm not that lost kid you knew." The tension in her gaze shifted, cracklings of surprise punctuated her steely facade. He could see her recalibrating, wrestling with skepticism, battling against acknowledgement. "Don't you see?" he continued, voice more fervent. "The moment I decided to reclaim my love for music, I stopped being afraid of your words. I refuse to let your mockery define my path any longer." The café surrounding them blurred in significance, the nose of the coffee grinder and low chatter dissolving into white noise. All that mattered was this confrontation, this pivotal moment that he had long feared. Would she challenge his growth, or would she acknowledge it? For an instant, Ben caught a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, an undisguised moment of respect. It unnerved him. He wasn't there to seek validation, he was there to break free from her shadow. Ben, if you're seriously considering a professional career in music, Claire began, her tone softening slightly, you know it's not an easy road. It's not just about talent. I understand that, he interrupted, fervor still bubbling. And I'm committed to the hard work it requires. I did not come here to negotiate or beg for your validation, I came to stand on my own 2 feet. His heart raced as uncertainty blanketed the air. Had he overstepped? Was it too late to draw back? Claire's expression morphed, caught somewhere between curiosity and disbelief. With a deep breath, he faced her scrutiny head-on. You think I can't handle criticism? Maybe I can teach you a thing or two about perseverance. Maybe we should share more than just this rivalry. The challenge hung before them, a tether bridging their complex history. Ben realized that for the first time, it wasn't just Claire he was trying to convince. It was himself. Would she rise to the challenge, or would his push for authenticity crush any hopes of reconciliation? The ground beneath them trembled with possibility, and in that moment, he recognized the true gravity of his journey. But the door swung open, spilling in a flurry of noise as a new figure entered. The unpredictability of their exchange was about to take yet another unexpected turn. Ben, I'm here to discuss your audition, the newcomer announced, shifting the entire focus of the room. The stakes were rising, and doubt uncoiled, leaving a bitter taste in the air. How would this alter the path he had begun to carve? Ben's heart raced as he turned to face the newcomer. The unexpected shift in energy filled the cafe with frantic curiosity. He recognized the voice, a well-known producer who had just been circling the industry, scouting for new talent. This was not merely an interruption, it was an opportunity handed to him on a silver platter. Your audition? Ben asked, trying to mask his excitement with a veneer of composure. Yes, the producer replied, glancing between Ben and Claire, sensing the tension crackling like static. You've got a shot at something big, a recording opportunity that could change everything. The implications hit Ben like a gust of wind, rattling him. All the moments of self-doubt, the struggles he had faced over the years, felt diminished by this singular moment. But along with the thrill surged an avalanche of anxiety. What if he stumbled? What if he wasn't ready? He wrestled with these thoughts, reminding himself of his earlier declaration to Claire. I didn't come here to negotiate or beg for your validation, he thought, but the pressure felt insurmountable, suffocating. The audition is tomorrow morning, the producer continued, oblivious to Ben's internal storm. And I want you to bring your best. Of course, Ben replied, forcing himself to sound calm, even as spiraling doubts crowded his mind. Claire shifted her posture, the initial disdain replaced with a scrutinizing focus. Are you really ready? The question hung between them, enticing and acerbic, a roll of the dice in a game neither had been prepared to play. I'm done avoiding the challenge, he said, his own words starting to solidify his resolve. I've taken my rehearsals seriously. This is what I want. That's the spirit, but you'll need more than that. Claire's tone, unexpectedly softer, carried an undertone of mentorship, flickering through the barriers they had erected. You'll have to put yourself out there fully. Show them who you are, not just as an artist, but as a person. Ben met her gaze, startled by the sincerity. Perhaps she was beginning to recognize the depth of his ambitions. Good luck with that, she added, a teasing smirk returning briefly before it fell away. But if they think you can just sing and strum, they're wrong. Her words echoed in his mind, but instead of taking offense, he realized they were a perfect challenge, a test of his commitment. Then I won't just sing. I'll make them see me. He glanced back at the producer, a newfound fire igniting within him, fueling his resolve. Maybe this was the moment he not only proved himself to Claire but also found a way to assert his unique voice in a crowded industry. What had previously felt like a hollow callback transformed into a real catalyst for growth, yet beneath the determination lurked that familiar anxiety, a bitter realization. Would it matter if he succeeded or failed at this audition? Had he really stepped beyond the limits of doubt? Do you honestly think you can separate yourself from the crowd? Claire shot an audacious edge to her challenge. What makes you different? The sudden intensity of her query forced Ben into contemplation. He couldn't just parrot another artist's dreams, he had to forge his own. Expanding on the moments he cherished, the raw connections through his music, the struggles that shaped his sound, he began connecting the dots in his mind. I'm not just another musician applying for a spot, Ben spoke deliberately. I'm a storyteller through my music, each note, every lyric, a reflection of my experiences and emotions. I want them to feel what I've lived. Claire's eyes widened, and for a moment, the mask slipped, revealing a glimmer of respect she could not hide. Just then, the gravity of Ben's admission settled in. It hit him, he wasn't just battling external judgment. He was also claiming ownership over his narrative. Let's see if you can back that up tomorrow. Claire's challenge lingered in the air, electrifying the previously dormant tension. As Ben nodded, his heart raced, excitement competing with dread. Tomorrow's audition would define him, but first, he had to navigate this burgeoning determination. With Claire's gaze relentlessly watching him, he felt compelled to rise to her challenge. But was he truly prepared? The weight of confrontation shifted, but so too did a newfound sense of purpose. The moment of self-discovery was dawning, ushering in greater pressures. This was only the beginning of a relentless pursuit, one that would either shatter him or fuel an unstoppable flame. Would he find the strength to illustrate a story that was authentically his, or would he allow fear to stifle his burgeoning growth? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the city, Ben found himself alone in his small apartment, the anticipation of tomorrow's audition coursing through him. The air was thick with the promise of change, but so too was it laced with his creeping doubts. He had visualized this moment countless times, feeling the exhilaration of a stage bathed in bright lights, an audience hanging on his every word. Yet, now that it was on the doorstep, he felt only the weight of uncertainty pushing down on him. Sitting on the edge of his bed, guitar perched on his knee, he began to strum a few chords absent-mindedly. Each note echoed through the silence of the room, searching for a rhythm that would quell the storm inside. But rather than offering solace, the sound highlighted the tension swelling in his chest. What if he sounded just like everyone else? What if his story fell flat when shared? With a sudden burst of determination, he began to play harder, allowing himself to channel frustration into the music. He played as though he were already standing in front of the producer, the weight of scrutiny pressing down on him. He envisioned Claire's piercing gaze and felt the intensity of her challenge. It reverberated in the depths of his subconscious. Be different, he muttered to himself, as if the words were a mantra meant to fortify his resolve. Show them who you are. The call to authenticity sparked something in his mind. He paused, hands easing off the strings, and reflected deeply on his life thus far. Memories washed over him like waves, revealing moments where music had been his refuge during turbulence. He recalled the laughter of friends, the urgency of his first heartbreak, the knot of worry that had settled in when he lost his job. Each experience had shaped not just his art but his identity, providing him with a canvas of emotions that no one else could replicate. His fingers resumed their dance on the guitar, weaving these memories into a rough but honest melody. Yes, he was a storyteller, one saturated with humanity. For the first time, he began to see that the notes he created were not just sounds, but rather bridges that connected his audience to the moments he had lived. This revelation flooded him with purpose. But as fast as the fire ignited, the shadows of doubt crept back in. What if they didn't connect? What if their reaction was indifferent, a polite nod to someone who couldn't transcend the walls of mediocrity? That fear loomed large, casting a veil over his newfound clarity. The juxtaposition of inspiration and anxiety spiraled, creating a palpable tension within him. He couldn't let this moment slip through his fingers that he began to write, pouring his fears onto paper, crafting lyrics that highlighted his vulnerability. Each line was an exploration of his psyche, an attempt to lay bare the struggles that had shaped him into the artist he aspired to be. It was a raw examination of his past, not merely written for the producer, but a testament to himself, a declaration of intent. Suddenly, the sound of a distant siren broke through the stillness, reminding him of the life converging beyond his walls. Tomorrow would arrive quickly, and the world he faced would demand not just a polished performance, but an unfiltered glimpse into his soul. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes, envisioning success. This wasn't just an audition, it was his chance to confront not only the industry but his own fears. He would have to stand fully present, a complex tapestry of experiences and emotions wrapped in music. The next morning, he would step on that stage not just as Ben the musician, but as Ben the storyteller. As fatigue seeped into his bones, he set the guitar down, calming the chaos within. But just as sleep beckoned, an unsettling thought surfaced. What if he didn't just want to be seen, but also heard his truth resonating beyond that room? This truth could alter everything. He had to find a way to vocalize it, to let it ripple beyond the confines of his fears. Tomorrow would hold the answers he sought. Would he unleash the story he's been holding back, or would the fear of vulnerability snuff out his burgeoning light? The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Ben's apartment, bright and unyielding, as if to remind him that today was not just any day. He jolted awake, adrenaline coursing through him. With one glance at the clock, he felt a surge of urgency that pulled him out of bed. Time was slipping away, and despite the swirling uncertainty that persisted in his mind, he couldn't afford to let it overwhelm him. He brewed a strong cup of coffee, letting the rich aroma fill the space around him as he rushed through his morning routine. Every movement felt mechanical, driven by a singular purpose, the audition. As he waited for the coffee to brew, he rehearsed the lyrics in his mind, mentally shaping the emotions he wanted to convey. Images of Claire flashed in his thoughts, her voice echoing the charge to be authentic, to show not just who he was, but what he felt. His fingers trembled slightly as he held the steaming mug. This was the moment he had longed for yet feared. The gravity of the situation bore down on him, and he couldn't ignore the gnawing sensation in his gut. He was standing on the edge of something profoundly transformative, yet uncertain. Dressed in his favorite, slightly worn t-shirt and jeans, he grabbed his guitar and slung it over his shoulder. The weight felt heavy, like it carried all his hopes and fears. With a deep breath, he stepped outside, the city bustling with life. The world's noise wrapped around him, yet he felt strangely isolated. It was as if he were encased in a bubble, hearing the sounds of laughter, conversation, and the drone of traffic, but feeling utterly disconnected from it all. On his way to the audition, every step felt laden with meaning. He was not just walking to a building, he was walking toward a potential rebirth. Memories of past failures coursed through him, times he performed and felt invisible, times he was dismissed before he could even share his truth. Each recollection was a reminder of what was at stake. As he approached the audition venue, an intimidating structure teeming with people, he felt his heart race. The reality of the situation stared him down, and he could sense his own vulnerability bubbling beneath the surface. He could feel the competing energies in the line, each artist encased in their own hopes and fears. Finally, it was his turn. He took a moment outside the door to collect himself, murmuring his lines, releasing the tension built within. It was now or never. He would not allow self-doubt to rob him of this chance. When he stepped into the room, the spotlight struck him in a wash of bright light, momentarily blinding him. The panel of producers sat before him, their expressions unreadable. He could almost hear the tick of judgment in the silence. This was it, every ounce of preparation was aimed at this exact moment. He took a deep breath, summoned every ounce of the authentic self he had unearthed the night before, and began to play. The chords rang out confidently. The words flowed, mingling with the melody, each one echoing the struggles and triumphs of his life. He was no longer just performing, he was laying his soul bare, reaching out as a storyteller, letting the music connect him to the audience before him. As the final notes hung in the air, a silence engulfed the room, broken only by the soft rustle of paper as the panel shifted in their seats. Ben's heart pounded as if it were trying to escape the confines of his chest. Did they feel the emotion? Did they see him? One of the judges leaned forward, a glint of intrigue dancing in her eyes. "That was interesting," she remarked. The others nodded in agreement, but an unreadable tension hung in the air. He felt the weight of their gaze and the apprehension returned with full force. Had his vulnerability resonated, or was it just mere curiosity they felt? What did "interesting" really mean? Before he could ponder further, the judge continued, "I'd like to hear more." Ben felt a flicker of hope ignite and with it, a resolve to stay vulnerable, to dive deeper. But a new, sharper fear pierced through. What if revealing more only exposed his shortcomings? What if they weren't interested in hearing him anymore when he really opened up? The moment of decision loomed large. Would he embrace that risk, or remain bound by the safer path of superficiality? He took a breath, ready to answer. This was a defining moment that could reshape everything he believed about himself as an artist. What lay ahead would either shatter him or elevate him to heights he'd only dared to dream of. As the echoes of the previous day's performance lingered in Ben's ears, dawn broke over the city, washing it in warm golden hues. He sat at the edge of his bed, hands clasped tightly, heart racing as the sun illuminated his humble apartment. Today was a turning point, a moment where the convergence of hope and resolve would either solidify his identity or rend it apart. He pushed aside the fear that writhed within him, focusing instead on the melody he would weave into the day. The symphony of determination drowned out lingering doubts that had clung to him like petals in the breeze. "Today, I'll step into my truth," he thought, pulling his well-worn violin off the wall, brushing it for dust like he was awakening a sleeping giant. It no longer felt like a relic of the past but a trusty companion on the journey ahead. Before his morning coffee could cool, he raced through his practice, allowing the notes to resonate deeply within his chest. Here in his solitary space, he transformed anxiety into passion, each stroke of the bow a tribute to every struggle he had faced. A new realization anchored him: vulnerability was not a weakness, but a courageous strength. In the acceptance of his flaws lay the power to share the conductor of his life's melody. This was not just about proving Claire wrong, it was about honoring the musician, the man he had always been destined to be. Ben dressed purposefully, choosing his most confident attire. As he entered the audition room, he regarded each judge with firm resolve. This presentation was not merely for their approval, it was an invitation for connection, for them to see beyond his role as a janitor, reaching into the soul he had meticulously crafted. "Show them who you are," replayed in his mind as he gripped the violin, the warmth of the wood radiating through him. He felt grounded, present. With each note that flowed from his instrument, he sculpted a narrative laden with his past struggles, heartbreaks, and victories. He performed not for applause, but for his own personal triumph, sharing the intimate story of who he was and who he could become. As he poured his heart into the last chord, the panel's attentive gazes felt different this time. What had been skepticism transformed into genuine appreciation. Soft whispers stirred among them, intrigued, nodding in agreement, some even leaning forward. No longer fearing judgment, Ben felt a surge of empowerment coursing through him. The final note hung like a shimmering echo, vibrant and alive, sealing not just his performance but his renewed identity. The silence that followed was heavy, saturated with possibilities. One judge finally spoke: "Your sound has a compelling depth. There's authenticity woven into each phrase. We'd like to invite you back for a full audition with the orchestra." That sentence, laden with promise, struck Ben like a burst of sunlight penetrating a storm, overwhelming yet illuminating. It validated all of his hard work, the relentless practice, the conquering of fears that had chased him like shadows. The panel saw him not just as a janitor but as an artist worthy of a stage, a performer rooted in truth. Returning home that evening felt surreal. Each street lamp glimmered like a spotlight, narrating the journey he had undertaken. He had defied expectations, challenged self-doubt, and emerged victorious not just in the eyes of the producers but within himself. The once invisible janitor was now an aspiring orchestra participant, filled with dreams that were not only tangible but held significance. As Ben placed his violin on the stand, he felt a sense of accomplishment he had long since coveted. It was not merely the acceptance letter he had received, it was the unshackling of his spirit, reclaiming his identity as a musician. He emerged from the fray, assured and resolute, ready to seize whatever opportunities awaited him. In that moment of reflection, he realized the true victory was his transformation. He had learned that resilience superseded the weight of others' opinions. His heart swelled with pride. He was not just a janitor anymore, but Ben, the musician, storyteller, fully equipped to craft his narrative. He turned to his instrument with gratitude, knowing that the journey had only just begun. With renewed courage, he whispered to the universe, "This is only the start." You need to subscribe now to be a part of this transformative journey, witnessing the next exclusive emotional stories unfold. Hit that like button immediately to help spread this inspiring message far and wide to those who need to hear it. Comment with your thoughts and theories on Ben's incredible journey. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to understand the power of self-discovery and resilience in their own lives.